Hey there, this is Misery by Stephen King. The genre is horror, thriller, and fiction. This is presented by Claire Keel. I have to rush or I may exceed the time limit. Ah ha ha ha! Stephen King was born on September 21st, 1947, in Portland, Maine. He graduated from the University of Maine and later worked as a teacher while working on his career as a writer. His first novel, Carrie, was his first big success and has become one of the most iconic faces of horror. His books have sold more than 315 million copies worldwide and been adapted into numerous successful films. Stephen King has published at least 99 novels with many successes, such as Pet Sematary, The Shining, It, Carrie, Doctor Sleep, and The Institute. We begin the story in Sidewinder, Colorado, a made-up location that King uses in many of his novels. Paul wakes up in bed at Annie Wilkes' house, injured and confused. His legs have been crushed in a supposed car crash, and Annie claims to be his nurse. He is crippled, and the house is desolate and locked in with snow. So there is no way out. He remembered all this before he opened his eyes. He was aware of the woman sitting next to his bed. When he opened his eyes, he looked in her direction. At first, he couldn't speak. His lips were too dry. Then he managed to ask, "Where am I?" "Near Sidewinder, Colorado," she said. "My name is Annie Wilkes," she smiled. "You know, you're my favorite author." This passage is on page 2. Annie Wilkes. I've read many Stephen King novels, and I find the situation of Misery and the antagonist, Annie, to be the most terrifying. I think Annie is the perfect example of how much human beings are capable of. Annie is a felon, an unknown murderer, and a diagnosed sociopath and schizophrenic. She is an incredibly terrifying and disturbed woman. Annie has lived alone for almost her whole life, and has thoroughly enjoyed the Misery series, a romantic novel series by Paul Sheldon. She self-describes herself as Misery and Paul's biggest fan. How far will she go to indulge in her obsession with Paul? Suddenly, her stony face seemed to break into pieces. She was standing at the door on her way out, and she rushed across the room at him. She screamed and punched her fist down on the swollen lump which was Paul's left knee. He threw his head back and screamed too. The pain streamed out from his knee to every part of his body. "So you just sit there," she said, her lips still pulled back in that horrible grin, "and think about who is in charge here, and all the things I can do to hurt you if you behave badly or try to trick me. You seem to think I'm stupid, but I'm not, and you can cry and shout all you want while I'm away, because no one will hear you. No one comes here because they all think Annie Wilkes is crazy. They all know what I did, although the court did say that I was innocent. There wasn't enough evidence, you see." This is on page 19. Paul Sheldon. Paul Sheldon is a famous, wealthy writer of the Misery series, a romantic fiction series. He is a recently divorced, middle-aged man with not many attributes other than that he was smart and a good writer. He is the protagonist in this story, and throughout this story he goes through insane physical and mental abuse. He's very intelligent and somehow learns how to crack Annie's psychotic tendencies. He has less character layers than Annie, and I think this was to make him more relatable and draw the focus more towards Annie. He was Paul Sheldon. He smoked too much. He had married twice, but both marriages had ended in divorce. He was a famous writer. He was also a good writer, but he was not famous as a good writer. He was famous as the creator of Misery Chastain, a beautiful woman from 19th century England, whose adventures and love life now filled 8 volumes and had sold many millions of copies. On page 1. The conflict of the story is Paul trying to escape, Annie trying to make him fall in love with her, and to rewrite his newest novel to her liking. As Paul is beaten and mentally abused daily, he has to worry about trying to escape his hostage situation to save himself and the Misery book series. He is weakened because of his crippled legs, so it makes it even more difficult for Paul. Annie goes through many psychotic schemes to get Paul to want to stay, but he sees right through it almost immediately. An example of this conflict comes from page 13. Annie, please, I'm in terrible pain. Tears were streaming down his face. I know, dear. Soon. She left and came back again with a typescript of fast cars and a box of matches. No, he said, crying and shaking. No. And the thoughts burned into his mind like acid. Everyone had always said that he was crazy not to make copies of his typescript. Yes, she said, her face clear and calm. She held out the matches to him. It's foul and it's no good. But you're good, Paul. I'm just helping you to be good. Plot points. One of the most exciting and gripping moments in this novel is towards the end, so of course I'm not going to give that away. You should read the book though, it's really good. Towards the beginning of the novel, Annie reads one of Paul's newest unpublished novels and despises it. She scolds him for the profanity and asks him to burn it. The way she goes about it is chilling and intense, and I feel very badly for Paul. 2 red marks had appeared on her cheeks. You dirty bird, she said. Oh, you dirty bird, how could you do that? You killed her. No, Annie, I didn't. It's just a book. She punched her fist down into the pillows next to his head. The whole bed shook, and Paul cried out in pain. He knew that he was close to death. I didn't kill her, he shouted. She stopped and looked at him with a narrow black expression. That gap. Oh, no, of course you didn't. Well, just tell me this then, Mr. Clever. If you didn't kill her, who did? Just tell me that. You tell lies. I thought you were good, but you're just dirty and bad like all the others. This passage comes from page 9. Mood. The mood throughout this novel is chilling, creepy, and thought-provoking. It makes you think about how terrifying people are and how they are capable of murder and abuse and other horrible things. I found that this book made me really think about the people in my life. How much do I really know them? This book is exciting but very scary and gory, so I don't recommend it to people that are scared easily and do not like descriptive example of abuse. I do not condone any of the actions in this book. Thank you. Theme, What I took away from this book and what I feel the central theme is that people are capable of more than you are aware of. When you go to the grocery store, take a look at the people around you. All of these people around you have separate lives that we have no idea about, and they could hurt you. This book scared me, but made me more aware of my surroundings. But Paul still sees Annie Wilkes waiting for him in corners, in shadows on the streets, and every woman who ever tells him that he is her favorite author. This is on page 85. Hey you guys, you really should go read Misery. Here are the reasons I think you should. It's definitely one of my favorite books, and it's really great. So. Also, the next 2 slides come from page 34 and 67. Thank you. You forgot, didn't you, Annie? You try to make everything seem normal, but you forgot. This is the first time you've forgotten anything this big, isn't it? In fact, Annie, you're getting worse, aren't you? You're starting to get a little worse every day. Your blank periods are getting longer and happening more often. Mad people can usually manage their lives, and sometimes, as I think you know, they get away with some very nasty actions. But there's a border between manageable madness and unmanageable madness, and you're getting closer to it every day. And part of you knows it. Again, this is on page 34. The dirty birds around here would say anything to make trouble for me. She paused, breathing hard, and again seemed to challenge him to deny what she was saying. I washed him, what was left of him, and drove up into the hills. I parked and carried him about a mile into the woods. I didn't hide him or anything. No, I knew the snow would cover him, and I thought the spring floods would take his body and clothes away. It worked even better than I'd imagined. They didn't find his body for a whole year, and 27 miles away. But your car won't go so far, Paul. It's too heavy. It'll just be stuck somewhere in the thick forest. Maybe someone will find its rusty body in 2 years' time or in 5 years' time when wild animals have made their home in the back seat and plants are growing through the windows. And by then, the book will be finished, and you'll be back in New York or somewhere, and I'll be living my quiet life here. Maybe we'll write to each other sometimes. She smiled at her imagination. Anyway, I was thinking, you see. Your car had gone, so I knew you could stay and finish the book, and that made me happy, because I love you so much. And again, this is page 67.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed my book talk. I'm sorry it's kind of long and exceeds the time limit, but I felt like this book deserved a further explanation than the 8 minutes. Thank you, I worked really hard on this.
Mr. Ashworth, I worked so hard.